Okay, in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a sunset like this. I'm going to take you through all the stages step by step so you can follow along. I'd just like to say a massive thank you to those people that have paid a visit to my Patreon. Your support is hugely appreciated and it's really helping motivate me and push towards a time where I can do more of these tutorials and hopefully do it full time eventually. If you're interested to find out more about that at the end of the video, please check the link in the description. Okay, so to begin with, I'm using an A4 canvas, and the brushes I'm going to be using are pretty much just exclusively the airbrush. Now I'll use a combination of the soft brush and probably the medium brush as well. They are set to the default settings, so I think I'm going to just change the pressure setting so that, so it only affects it slightly rather than it being too exaggerated. Now I've got a pre-selected range of colours here, so it goes from the sort of cold colours and then I've got some of the warmer colours as well. So the background colour I'm going to choose is going to be this soft bluey colour. There's not going to be very much of it showing at the end of the piece, but I just wanted to set that as a good way of contrasting some of the warm colours, and you'll probably get a section at the top where you do kind of see that colour just a little bit. So on the next layer, layer 1, I'm going to start thinking about adding some slightly darker tones at the very top. Now the sun's going to be sort of lower down in the landscape, or the sky rather, and you're going to get some warmer colours near the sun, but then you're going to get a brighter section, which is basically sort of upper atmosphere being illuminated by the light, and then you're going to get the sort of the edges of that upper atmosphere that are just going to be sort of a bit more subdued. So I'm going to pick the slightly darker blue, and with the soft airbrush I'm going to turn it quite large, but I'm going to turn the opacity really low. I just want to start to, just at the edges, take away some of the brightness, but not very much. If I wanted to do this a bit more dramatically, that's also an option. And then once I've done that, it's easy enough to go onto the settings here, the Gaussian blur, and just blur that up, and then it just sort of softens it, and actually that's done the job pretty well, so I'll leave that for there. The next thing I'm going to do is select another layer, and now I'm going to start introducing some of the warmer light into the scene. So like I said, the light blue is going to be the sort of upper atmosphere, and then when we get closer to the horizon, the sunlight is going to be coming through lots more density. So I'm just going to go onto this kind of yellow. Again, I'm going to turn the opacity quite low and keep it quite soft. Again, it's still on the soft airbrush, and I'm just going to start applying some layers of this really yellowy colour. Now for anyone who's actually seen one of my other painting tutorials, which was about a sky, you'll know that this is a very similar way to that I started this other tutorial, and there's definitely some consistencies when you come to do this type of sky, but there is going to be some definite differences to this one as well. So I'm just going to move to a slightly warmer colour here, more of an orange. I'm going to start layering this up as well. Again, I'm doing it gradually. I figure if you go too strong with a colour like that, there's no way you can go from there. But if you do it very gradually, then you can just sort of find your way with that a little bit more. I'm not too worried about what's going to go down here just at the moment, so I will just fill that area in. I'm going to go back to the yellow this time, I feel like I need a bit more of that. Too strong, turn it way down. Now, it is only the cloud that is being illuminated in this yellow colour. I don't want it to really blend too much into the blue. It will be slightly at this point, but I don't want it going too gradually, so I want it to be not exactly a stripe where it stops suddenly, but I don't want it fading out too gradually either. So it's a bit of a balance between the two. Okay, at this point I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to pick darker orange, it's almost the red. I'm going to turn the opacity, the brush size down, keep the opacity fairly low like that, and then I'm going to start just planning in where the actual horizon line is going to be. So I'm going to do it sort of around here. I'm keeping all my layers separate, so if I decide that I still need to do some adjustments to the underneath layers, then I can do that. So the layers are very, very useful. I turn the opacity down. I just want to start losing some of the illumination on the sides here. I want it to be not quite as bright as it's going to be in the centre, just a little bit, shutting out that light a little bit just at the edge. There's no absolute one way of doing something like a sunset or a skyscape. So I could do this differently, but for this particular piece I feel I want to shut the light down a bit more on the edges. I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to go to this sort of reddy, almost a purpley colour, so it's in the red area, ever so slightly over towards the sort of the pinks, but it's like a darker, duller version of that. So on this layer still, I'm going to begin drawing some smaller kind of cloud shapes, so I can turn the size of the brush way down. I just want to start blocking in some suggestion of where the clouds are going to actually be. So typically they're going to be, well, up here certainly, smaller in the distance. I'm going to be more in a kind of a line that goes across. More than likely to go over this colour and change it. It's not going to look orange by the end, but it's quite nice to do this in stages. Rather than rushing at it and going straight for the top colour, I try to build layers of colours. So if I add, for example, on top of that, a kind of purpley colour, then it seems to glow a lot better because there's a kind of base of orange underneath it, and it feels a lot better lit, and it's almost like there's a light coming from literally underneath and behind it, which is perfect. So a layer foundation of the kind of the lighter colours, the colours that seem to be better lit first, and then I apply sort of, it's almost like you're thickening up the cloud by adding layer upon layer upon layer. So as the cloud gets thicker and less light is allowed through the cloud, then you work on the darker colours then. So you're going to get more likely, when I've said this on other tutorials about clouds, where on the top you tend to get slightly more kind of round, irregular shapes, and then usually a kind of slight flattening off underneath. It's not always the case, but that tends to be the slight trend. I might decide to rub out some areas of this cloud and add a bit more of a break in places. Okay, I'm going to start doing a few more. I'm not going to do orange all the way up, because as it gets further up, then the orange is definitely going to be much less of a factor. Whilst it's near to the actual horizon line and the actual sun itself, there's definitely going to be a need for more orange underneath. So I'm just going to do a few more in this area, then I'll move on to some cooler colours. So I'm not worrying too much about the shape of the clouds at this point, not really. I can easily adjust them a little later on. Okay, so I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to choose a darker colour. And I've already got a preset colour here. It's more in the red area, slightly more towards the kind of pink, and it's going to be quite a dull version of that. But obviously you've got layer upon layer, so because I'm not using the full opacity, when I go over the orange, the two colours are going to mix together. So the clouds, as they go higher up, are generally, they would be getting closer to the viewer. So the clouds are going to get darker, and they're going to get bigger typically as well. So I'm keeping this kind of round motion here. I'm not doing straight lines. I'm just keeping a sense of a round shape. I will go over the edges of the cloud and actually pick out highlights later on. But for now, I'm just trying to get some blobs in there really. And then I can see what works and see what doesn't, and then sort of edit from that point on. So again, I'm not worrying about it being neat at this point. There's going to be a lot more editing goes on. So just have fun playing with forms. Sit back, look at it, see if there's any areas that you feel need more going over than others. But with something like clouds, it's definitely not something that there's one way to do things. So you just have to get a little bit of practice really and see what suits you and what looks right to your eye. Because if you were to photograph the same sky over the space of an hour, it would look different. You could take 100 pictures and it would look different on each one. So okay, so I'm going to move to a cooler colour. Now I've got the sort of, it's not the darkest blue, but it's a pretty dark blue here, as you can see, and I'm going to start adding some of those cloud shapes in. In fact, I need another layer before I do that. Easy to forget. I can increase the general size of these clouds too. Again, I will edit these. I might use the eraser tool later on just to sort of chisel away at the edges of some of these forms. feel at this point I want to go back onto some of the layers. So I'm going back onto the kind of yellow and orange colours here, and I feel like I want to use a bit more of the orange colour now. So start just again closing down some of the edges, details at the side here. Now I've got clouds that are darker and go over the top, then I'm not going to lose them, because again I'm working on a layer that's underneath the top ones anyway. So the overall effect I'm going for is really quite an orange and warm sort of light coming from the horizon. So I'm going to add a bit more of the yellow into the background perhaps, so it goes up to sort of here. Again, it's behind all the clouds, so you won't see it too much anyway. Now I'm going to go back onto my first sort of cloud layer. I'm going to start using some of the colours that I put on the layer above it, but I'm going to start just working into these edge clouds now, because I do want them to get darker as they go off towards the side here. I'm turning the size of the brush down, and I just want to start building in some finer texture. So do it gradually. You get a much more pleasing effect if you do it gradually. Something like this, especially when it's details that go off into the distance, you're going to get a lot of subtlety into the detail. It's not all going to be obvious initially. It's layers and layers of light and colour, and it's very gradual. There might just be one or two areas perhaps where you get a real dark sort of shape, but would be my advice not to go straight in with the darkest of the colour. And I shall do the same on this side too. You're only really going to get the sense of light coming into the picture once you really get that contrast going on. So there is a lot of light here now, but the more I kind of close it down to a specific area, it's going to really emphasise that some areas are dark and some areas are light. It's definitely the contrast on a scene like this that really gives you a sense that there's a strong light source in the piece. I'm going to go back onto this layer now, and I'm really going to start more dramatic. I think I'll go onto the orange that I have already selected, and I'm going to just maybe go for a darker version of it. I'm going to start again shutting out the light in certain areas. So as it gets down towards the horizon, this area, I don't really want much of the sun to be coming through. For this area I'm going to keep it slightly brighter perhaps, because I already did an underneath layer there as well. But I'm also going to introduce some of the darker colours here as well, just to again give a sense that the light is off in the distance. So I'll just go over this area. I also need to just perhaps go on this layer and add some more darker colours, and then maybe I'll just close this down. I mean, I'm only doing it just to emphasise that the lights and the sky of the piece anyway, so I'm not too bothered about the appearance of this area. Okay, so now I really feel like it's focused in the sky area. I will do something with this sort of point in the picture on another tutorial, but for now it just helps to shut out all the light of that area, so it really focuses up here. So now I'm going to go back to the sort of strong colours here, and I go back onto the red. We'll give a more vibrant version of it, turn the opacity down, just start bringing in more of this. In fact, turn it down even more. I'm going to allow it to just soften the horizon line of the land as well. So we've got a real warmth coming through now, which I'm quite happy with. So I'm going to jump onto the next layer up. I'm going to start working back into this a little bit more. I'm going to go back to the duller version of that red. Turn the size of the brush down, just remind you which layer I'm working on. In fact, so I'm going to go, while I'm here, back onto this layer. I'm going to just, I think I want to get rid of some of the blue. I want there to be a suggestion that there's layers of cloud. Sometimes you see right through, and then other times you don't. So I think in this area I want to shut out all of the background blue sky. Nice, needs to get more of an orangey colour as it goes towards the sun. That's too orangey, I'm not happy with that. So I'm going to retry that. I do want some of the orange colour coming in, but I've definitely overstepped the amount that I wanted to introduce. That's the beauty of working digitally, is you can just undo exactly what you're not happy with. It eliminates a lot of the fear that you'd have with traditional ways of working. I do remember days when I was doing sort of traditional oil painting especially, that you just tend to be a bit more timid about the way you approach things. You really do a lot of sitting around umming and ahhing about exactly how you're going to proceed, whereas with digital it allows you the luxury of just going ahead and trying it. If it doesn't work, you can just undo it. I really want to bring the sun down into a specific kind of location in the sky, so maybe it needs a bit more of the dull colours sort of surrounding up here as well. Okay, so I'm going to make some decisions about where I'm going to put the actual sun itself, so it's really going to help now in terms of some of the other decisions that I make with the piece. So this is the sun itself, so everything else now is going to be affected by that point. So I'm going to go to the layer above the actual sun itself. I'm going to start with an orange kind of colour. I'd already got pre-selected, maybe having some clouds that will go sort of very close to the actual sun itself, but in front of it obviously. And now I can go to a darker version maybe and start to just, anything that's just a little bit further away, I can start intensifying some of the darker colours. In fact, I'll stick with a richer colour in fact. Do the richer oranges before I start subduing any areas. So I just want to get rid of some of the brightest yellow colours around the sun now. So it's okay that it has a little bit of yellow in areas, but it's not going to be the whole area because I want to just narrow the light source down to the most intense point. Okay, so I feel that the effect of the light now is starting to make more sense. Obviously the details need working on at this point, but the colours and the effect of the light is starting to work better, which is great. So I'll just run you through the layers that I've already got. So you probably won't see very clearly now that first layer that I produced. So, well, we had the blue background colour, the very pale blue, and then we had a slightly sort of darker edge to the top of that. Now it's really not having much of an impact, but I'm going to leave it there anyway. Then the next layer, you can see it's got most of the warmth and the light of the horizon is on that layer, and the next layer is sort of ignoring the actual bottom area, is some of the sort of mid cloud areas. So it's not where most of the warmth is coming from, there's definitely sort of another mid area where most of that detail is, and then the top layer is where the sort of the nearest clouds and therefore the darkest clouds are. I'm going to spend a bit of time on that layer in fact, because they definitely need some refining. I'm just going to pick my darker blue. Perhaps I'm going to change that blue slightly. It feels like when you have it contrasted with an area now in this, rather than the light blue, when you're having it next to the orange, it looks almost a little bit too blue. So I need to have a kind of darker, greyer version of that blue now, I think. Sometimes you just have to readjust your colour palette as you go along. What I could also do is that if I'm not happy with the general colour, I can pick a warmer colour if I so wish, and I can just gently go over that and it will just knock it back, get rid of some of the bright blueness of it. I'm not sure whether it shows up on camera anyway, but I'm going to delete that layer first and continue working on the dark blue. So normally if there was a full painting, I'd be zooming in and I'd be getting the textures just right, but I want to keep my zoom at a consistent sort of level here. I don't want to be zooming in too often. I want to show you the overall impact of everything that I do. So I'm just trying to keep it at this sort of constant zoom, or zoomed out rather. So I'm trying to demonstrate the effect, but this is not by any means a fully finished painting. But still, I'm trying to get it as detailed as I can at this zoom level. So that means little bits of texture coming off the main shape of the cloud, just tightening up the edges and areas as the actual cloud forms. Another way of doing that would actually to be using the eraser. I can just start to take away some areas as well. In fact, the eraser is quite useful because you can, especially if you turn the opacity down, you can just knock certain areas back a little bit, so it just pushes them slightly further away, and then you can go back on with the actual brush tool and again double that effect by picking out the sharp edge of this new section here. So you can see this area of that particular cloud looks closer now than this bit that's just slightly above it. So I'm just interplaying now. I'm just swapping and changing between the eraser and the actual brush tool. But essentially I'm, creating the same kind of effect with both. You could just use the brush tool, but it is useful to swap and change between the two. Another useful tool might be the actual smudge tool. Again, it's quite good for just disrupting and breaking sort of brush marks and the lines. If you're not quite happy with the edge of something, then you just, by using that, especially in that same kind of motion, it really does some interesting things, quite cloud-like actually, so it is a very useful tool. It's something you need to use subtly, because if you do too much, you're going to start making it look like quite a stormy kind of sky where the wind is really affecting the clouds. So it depends on what you're aiming for, but it doesn't generally look like a stormy sky. It looks like quite a calm. So I don't want to use those kind of movements too much. Okay, I'm going to use the really dark blue in areas now at this point. I'm going to start using it to bring out some of the areas on the same sort of cloud banks that perhaps are just the most forward. Again, I'm just using this subtly. I want to pick out layers and layers. So the opacity is not on full. So if I do one sweep over it, and then I can do another one, and I'm just building up the sense of texture and layers within the cloud. So into these cloud banks, I want to get a slight suggestion now. The light is sort of coming from above. There is obviously the light source of the sun itself, which will be slightly hitting the underside of all the clouds, but on the top edge of the cloud, so up here, is where the impacts of the blue light is going to be impacting. Very similar to the previous tutorials that I've done on sky, but in this particular example, the balance is more towards the warm colours hitting the underside, but there still is definitely a subtle element of the blue hitting at the top as well. So you just need to bear that in mind, even if it's just really keeping the darker areas when you're adding on top now, just for mainly at the bottom edge of the cloud. That's enough really to create that effect. So I'm just going to go back onto the layer underneath. I'm going to start really using the kind of greyed, almost purpley red, and I'm really going to start darkening up some of these clouds that go a bit closer to the actual sun now. I'm going to go to this underneath layer. I feel like I need to again start influencing or start changing the kind of colour tone. I want to make it kind of even darker orange, almost red in areas. So you'll just start to see it sort of coming underneath a little bit more. I'm just going to return to this layer and start adding more of the littler details in the clouds again. Right, so I've just gone onto this layer underneath, and I really am exaggerating the point now, so I'm closing down all the light in the surrounding area other than the actual sun itself. Having said that, I am going to use the light coming from the sun to, in a moment, start hitting edges of the cloud, and that'll bring more of that kind of yellowy colour back into this area too. But I want to really exaggerate the light coming from the sun itself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to put it at the top for now, but I may create another one and start to have some details coming from underneath some areas too. I'm going to start using the orange and the yellow to start picking out some highlights on the cloud. So there's going to be areas in cloud like this. In fact, I probably need the yellow in order for it to stand out. So there's going to be areas of this cloud that is just affected on the edge. So the sun is obviously behind this area of cloud, and it's sort of touching the edge of the cloud and just making it glow. And so it's going to be impacting on the edges of the cloud, especially sort of when it's in this region, and it's going to be affecting the underside of anything that's immediately sort of above it. Anything that goes in front of it is going to be highlighted on every edge. And when it gets really close to the sun, it starts to just break down the sort of the dark parts of that cloud completely. So maybe just use the yellow to start adding some slight sense that there's some extra layers of cloud in there, so some little stripes of the yellow, just to pick out some really distant kind of cloud details. As it gets further away from the centre, that same highlight is going to become more of a kind of orange version of it. It's still going to be much brighter than things of the cloud itself generally, but it's going to be a more orangey version of it. So perhaps I'll just, similar to that orange, but a slightly richer version. So anything sort of over here, it's going to have an edge that you can only really see perhaps when you get a kind of something darker in the background, like here. So you'll see there it's got a slightly duller background and the cloud is dark. So now you can see that orange edge to it in areas too. Again, as it gets further away, the highlights get lesser and lesser. I'm going to come back to the warm highlights a little later, but I think for now I'm going to move to some of the whiter highlights, and they're going to go just in areas on the sort of top edge of the cloud as well. They're not going to be as potent, they're not going to be as strong, but they are still going to have an impact in areas. Maybe turn the size of the brush down and the opacity too. This is useful when you come into more like the kind of centre areas of the dark cloud, and just give a slight edge to some of the forms that are slightly further forward on that cloud bank. Not too much, just a suggestion of it here and there. I feel like I need to go back onto the blue area. I'm going to use the darkest blue. I'm going to start just sort of bringing in some darker areas to some of these clouds as well. Especially now that I've got a light edge to some of them, I can now sort of use the dark colour and go right up towards that edge a bit more. And now it's a really nice contrast between the dark and the light. I'm going to go back onto the first layer, and I'm going to, as well as the darkness that's near the top, I feel like I need to add some light into the blue area as well. So I'm just going to go to almost white, turn the brush size up, and I'm going to start adding some really light blue into this area. And I feel like it really adds a, I'll just go back a few, you can perhaps just see the impact that that's had. Put it back in, just illuminates this area. I hope you can pick it up on camera. It's very evident actually when you're looking at the iPad itself, but not quite much convinced that it does pick up on camera, but it definitely does make a difference. I'm going to go back up to the top layer, and I'm just going to do some fine tuning now. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for today. I'd just again like to say a massive thank you to those people that have already visited my Patreon page and offered their support. It's really motivated me to do more of these kind of tutorials. I'd love to be able to do it full time eventually. And with people's support, I'm able to produce more of this type of content. So if you feel like you learned something or you just enjoyed watching a video, if you're able to offer me support, it would be massively appreciated. The link is down in the description. I also do lots of other types of tutorials, so you can check through my playlists. Perhaps leave me a comment in the comment section to tell me what kind of tutorial you'd like to see me do next. Catch you back here again. See you next time.